Hey everyone, what's up? Today we are in for an amazing treat. We're with my buddy Rich Gallagher. Rich is the author of The Million Dollar Writer. Now, a lot of people would think that, he's famous and he's written, one bestseller or something, but such is not the case with Rich. Rich is one of the humblest guys I know, one of the most helpful guys I know, and someone who has been at writing bit by bit for what, 600 years, Rich, I think it was that we talked about last time.
Something like that, about 20 at this point.
Yeah, 20 years of writing, $1 million writer, author of The $1 Million Writer, and lots of other great books, and someone that I admire greatly. Rich, thanks for being with me, buddy.
Well, thank you, Phil. And boy, the feeling's mutual. You're one of my best buddies. It's great to be here on Facebook Live with you.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. So, hey, so Rich, so first, if memory serves, we got started connecting because you were in the help desk space. You were an IT manager. So, Rich, help desk, customer service. Come on, man. Tell me about this.
Absolutely. Well, that's how I really got started writing seriously, in a sense. Now, I actually got started writing seriously back in the 1980s when I was at a startup software company putting in 80-hour weeks. My wife said, "I never see you anymore." And I said, "Okay, honey, what do you want to do? Take a writing course with me." And at the end of that course, the professor said, "You're good at this." Me, C student in writing in college? That was amazing. So back to your question about help desk. So I became director of customer services at this software company in Los Angeles. And that was where I really got bit by the bug about writing about the mechanics of how we interact with people, which has kind of been my brand as an author for the rest of my life.
Yeah, the human interaction, I think, Rich, is something that you do remarkably well. It's always fascinating to watch how that transpires. So early customer service. Now let's kind of zoom out here to now you're a freaking licensed practicing therapist. Rich, come on, man.
Well, look, what am I going to say, Phil? I'm a mutt. And it's hard to explain myself to people sometimes. But when I was an undergraduate at Cornell University in the 1970s, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I was one of Cornell's first dual majors in engineering and psychology. People joke that I would grow up to build bridges that would talk people out of jumping off of them. And I was really torn back then in the 70s between whether I wanted to be an engineer or a therapist. And so I became a software executive. I drank the family Kool-Aid. I come from a big family of people who all have engineering degrees. Had a great career in the software business, but I always wanted to be a therapist someday later in life. So in my 50s, I finally went back to grad school and had a very busy therapy practice for close to a decade.
Wow, that's incredible, man. That's really crazy. So I think, though, they're all related, Rich. I mean, we're talking people off the ledge in IT customer service, right? They're like, "Oh, no, just reset your password, put your computer to life isn't that bad, and we can get through this if we have some coping strategies." So talk to me, Rich, about those connections there, and then we'll move into some writing talk.
Absolutely. They're very closely aligned. In fact, one of my best-selling books on customer service, The Customer Service Survival Kit, which came out in 2013, it hit #1 in customer service as soon as it was released, still sells very strongly after 5 years. Even last month, it was one of the top 5 books in customer service. That book is all based on principles of marriage and family therapy, which is my training as a psychotherapist. And so taking the mechanics of how we work with our moods, our emotions, and how we communicate with other people, that all relates in a very real way.
Yeah, it absolutely relates. And I think that's the thing that so many of us miss, Rich, is that everything is interconnected. Our whole life, our whole being is so interconnected. So when we think about writing, though, what does that mean, Rich? Go ahead. You want to go riff on that? Go ahead. Go back to connection. Go ahead.
No, sure, absolutely. Just one quick thing on connections. I mean, Phil, because you're a primo public speaker, and that's how we first met. Is you and I as public speakers, and you could make the phone book interesting, and that's really kind of part of the connection as well, which is that when I first started speaking publicly and writing about customer service, I wrote average trade books on customer support, and I gave average speeches on customer service. When I decided to start writing about how to handle your very worst situations with people, I struck gold. And the fact that I could write about how to handle your very worst situations, the fact that I could get up on stage and point at my glasses and say, "Go ahead, get mad at me, and I'll show you how to defuse this," that was pure gold for me. And so great topics, great titles, that circles back to how you become a successful author and a successful writer.
So Rich, you mean to tell me that I don't have to write cosmopolitan quizzes to make money writing? Come on, man. Nothing but clickbait? The BuzzFeed of the internet? Come on. Talk to me about some of the boring stuff you've written.
You sound like you've read my book here. The key principle about the $1 Million Writer, which, by the way, in the interest of full disclosure, Phil helped talk me into writing. The key thing about the $1 Million Writer is I made a very good living for many years as a professional commercial freelance writer. And here's the big secret of the book. Boring is better. Boring writing is lucrative. It's easy to get into. You can build a niche for yourself or multiple niches in it. And it's a great, great way to make a living. I mean, here's the way I'm going to lay it out for you is let's take 3 people who are all sitting behind identical word processors, all cranking out identical amounts of verbiage. One of them is writing clickbait for Cosmopolitan and sending a query to them about it. They have a sky-high slush pile. It will never get accepted. The second person is writing a lifestyle blog, and she's going to get an honorarium that might pay for her next trip to Starbucks. The third person is writing a marketing blog for a corporation. She's making $70 an hour, and she's going to be doing that for them all year. And that's the difference between being a successful writer and being what most people think of as a writer. And I'm going to say one other thing about this. Commercial writing sharpens your axe for any kind of public writing that you want to publish.
What does that mean, Rich?
Well, let's say somebody's making an alarm clock and needs a manual for that alarm clock. It's a niche audience. You're never going to become famous writing it. But that manual needs to get written and somebody needs to write it. And commercial freelance writers are mission critical to the organizations they serve because people can't sell their products without training. They can't sell their products without marketing collateral. And it's really a gold mine of work for people. If you walk up and down the main street of your town or around the industrial parks of your town, every single company there needs written materials and will pay for quality.
Interesting. So you mean I could write for the local 5 and 10 store? Hold on.
Absolutely.
Maybe there aren't those anymore, right? But the local, whatever the locally owned business is, and write things for them because they need collateral for maybe their flyers. They need collateral for the circulars. They need collateral to even just for their shelves to understand what the heck they're selling, right?
Absolutely correct. And you take any niche in any business in your town and they need written collateral. And the more boring, the better. So think of it this way. If you're writing lifestyle pieces on how to get a date, you're behind a very long line of people. And frankly, most of those people could get sucked into a deep hole in the earth and never be missed. But on the other hand, if you create a portfolio of software documentation and go knocking on doors of software companies in your town, or if you learn how to write manuals for people who manufacture widgets and go to manufacturers in town, you're hired. And I can't imagine that you're not going to make a great living if you're a good writer.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. I mean, so many times, people think best-selling writer means something sexy, or best-selling writer means something I might have read. But, somebody had to write the instructions on the back of the shampoo and conditioner that we use every day. Right, Rich?
Absolutely correct. And, I am technically a best-selling author. I've sold over $1 million worth of books. I've had 2 major category bestsellers in customer service. I even had one book that was a finalist for Business Book of the Year. But the thing that people don't realize is that I also made over $250,000 writing and editing articles on tobacco tax policy for the federal government. I made lots of money writing manuals for thermal printers. Most of the stuff that I write isn't the least bit glamorous, but it made for a very nice living. And it was really funny when I got started out because I ran screaming from corporate life. I was a software executive at one point for many years. And as my big company started laying people off, I went to them and said, oh, me, and left with a consulting retainer. Came back to my native Ithaca, New York. And you'd be amazed how many people would come up to me and say, oh, poor Rich, you're getting too old for corporate life. You're trying to make it as a starving writer. And I'm biting my lip and muttering to myself, I'm making a 6-figure income.
That's so funny. So, Rich, I mean, you genuinely are one of the more humble guys, but you just said something that I think is important, and that is sometimes you get a bestseller. Sometimes you
That's
catch
right.
a little fire in a bottle. So, how did that happen, Rich? I mean, I know it's not accidental. You are very
Of
measured,
course.
very smart. So, talk to us about how you took that customer service survival guide up into the stratosphere, because frankly, Rich, that book still outsells most of the other customer service books.
Well, thank you. And you're absolutely correct. Every book that I've ever written has been purpose written around a genre that sells. There's two parts to this book, The $1,000,000 Writer, that I wrote. The first half of it is how to be a successful freelance writer and make a good living at it. The second part is how to be a successful royalty published author, because I feel that nothing supercharges your reputation as a freelance writer or as a public speaker or other streams of income as having a successful royalty published book that's on the shelves of major bookstores. So back to your question about how did this become a bestseller? My real secret of being a successful royalty published author is work backwards from the market. Don't work forwards from your crazy ideas. So my first number one book in customer service, What to Say to a Porcupine, was very purpose written around a genre that was very popular and selling back in 2008, the genre of business fables. This was the era of books like Who Moved My Cheese and The 1 Minute Manager. So those books have a format to them, which is they're 25,000 words or less. They always have a moral. They're easy to read. They teach very important life lessons for businesses. So what I did, and I almost wrote this book with a calculator, I studied the genre and the history of Aesop's fables, which were used to teach life lessons to people 2,500 years ago. And I faithfully reproduced the format and genre of Aesop's fables in this book. I had 20 fables on difficult customer situations. They all were about 500 words, just like Aesop's fables. They alternated between people and animals, just like Aesop's fables. They all had a moral. And I tied it in with the genre of a hot-selling field. And so this book was really purpose-written for a market. The customer service survival kit was similarly purpose-written around a need in the marketplace for a book on how to handle your very worst customer situations. What people don't realize is that when I worked with, what's now the Amicom division of HarperCollins to develop this book, I was put on a very specific word count and format for this book. People have short attention spans nowadays. This book was about 45,000 words, which is about half of what I normally write back in those days. And that market planning was really a big part of the reason it was so successful.
Wow. Wow. That's freaking brilliant, Rich. It's so simple, and yet it's so brilliant that you would do that. So where do you get started with that? I mean, how do you start researching a bestseller before you even start writing a bestseller?
That's one of the great things about nonfiction writing is you don't have to write the whole book first. In fact, you really shouldn't write the whole book. Nonfiction books get sold to royalty publishers based on a 30-page proposal. And that to me is one of the coolest things about nonfiction writing is you're only 30 pages away from trying to pre-sell something that you know is going to be on the shelves of a bookstore at some point. That's one of the things I love about this genre. So you always start with a plan and start with an outline. I'm going to circle us around to another field that I made a lot of money in, which is ghostwriting other people's books. I've ghostwritten for some pretty A-list people, including the CEOs of major corporations and top academics. And if I told you who they were, they'd have to take me out and shoot me. But when I ghostwrite a book for somebody, I don't just sit down with a microphone, get their story, and start writing. I give them what's pretty similar to a math lecture. I lay out all the various genres of books that are currently selling in nonfiction business, point out their style and their format. I mentioned that Seth Godin writes in second person, uses hundreds of micro examples. Thought leadership books have 2 or 3 weighty examples per chapter. I walk them through the mechanics of these styles. Have you noticed that in science fiction, everybody writes trilogies? Nobody writes a quad, for example. And so then once we agree on which kind of bestseller they want to smell like, then I write like a 5 or 6 page white paper that deconstructs how this person sounds like. Joe likes to use simple declarative sentences. He's not afraid of controversy, etc. And I break down how they sound because my job is to sound like me or like them and not me. And then finally, we then scope out the outline of a book. And then those 3 things become our game plan for executing what normally becomes a very successful project. So back to my books, same thing is that, again, everything I create is purpose written. My outlines, each chapter has a purpose. Everything is based on reproducible points of style or on books that sell. And so there's a lot of mechanics that go into the planning of a book before you ever set pencil to paper.
Holy crap. That's awesome, Rich. That's so, I like your point. That's so like math like, right? That's so not the creative writing process, but I would say that's why you're $1 million writer, because you understand that stuff, right? So Rich, so
Absolutely.
talk to me about the difference between success and, I hesitate to call it failure, but like not success with some writing.
Oh, I'd be delighted to. Let me give you an example of where I felt I did fail. My very first customer service book for a major publisher was called Great Customer Connections. It was a book on the psychology of customer situations. And it came out around the same time from Amicom as another book from them called Just Listen by Mark Goulston. Just Listen became an enduring national bestseller in communication skills. My book sold maybe $25,000 worth of copies, which is terrible, by the way, in the book business, and tanked immediately. So I'll never forget opening up Just Listen and comparing it to my book. And I had a big smile on my face as I looked through it because I could see exactly where my book stunk and his was wonderful. Mine had a fairly bland opening. He started off, he's a psychiatrist who trains hostage negotiators. He starts off the book talking about what he says to the guy with the gun at his head in the parking lot to get him to put down the gun and walk to safety. Who wouldn't want to read more at that? I had endorsements from friends and colleagues. He had endorsements from top people in the country. I mean, I just had a big smile on my face saying, I know exactly what I need to do with my next book. So the customer service survival kit, which, as you know, incidentally, is very much repurposed from that original book. That started off with an endorsement from our friend Carol Roth, who's a New York Times bestseller. I interviewed the head of grief counseling during 9/11 for United Airlines for some of my opening examples. And I really borrowed from the mechanics of a good book that somebody wants to take off the shelves to make that successful. So if you're willing to learn from your mistakes, and if you're willing to follow the market and not just your muse it every time, I think most good writers can be very successful.
Wow. So much good stuff. So Rich, talk to me about your $1 million writer, your program and your book. I mean, because it is
Absolutely
super duper helpful. There's so much jam packed in there that people can take away and go make a good living if you do
Absolutely.
the work. This is no overnight success, though, folks. I want to quickly disclaim this.
That's right.
I got an early copy of this book. If you want to get rich fast, do not buy this book. If you want to really build a business about writing, this is the book for you. So, Rich, take it away, buddy.
That's correct. This is very different from most of the books in its genre. Right now, currently as we speak, The $1 Million Writer is the number 10 book in the country on business writing and one of the top books nationally on business writing. Almost every other competitive book is on how to get rich writing Kindle books, for example. And some people do that, and more power to them if they can. My book is how to make a successful middle-class living, upper middle-class living, kind of living that buys new cars and health insurance and pays your mortgage and provides for your family as a writer. So in terms of how the book came about, well, first of all, again, in the interest of full disclosure, a lot of this book came together at a lunch in Tampa, Florida with you, Phil Gerbyshak, where I was telling you over our pizza at Grimaldi's saying that, look, this sounds like such a cheesy get-rich-quick idea for a book. I'm not sure I want to write it. And I remember you saying, no, Rich, you have to write it, and you have to write it under your brand, and it's important. So first of all, thank you for putting that information out there and talking me into it. So as far as how the book came together from that, this is a book that I truly wrote from my heart. I really was successful as a writer, and I was successful as an author, and I know how to do it, and I know how any good author can be this way. One thing I think differentiates this book from other books in this genre, especially the get-rich-quick writing Kindle books, most books I compete with hold a very shiny object out there that only a very few people are going to do. So when they read those books and discover that to really make a living as a Kindle author, you're going to have to create a zillion people in your mailing list. You're going to have to bug everybody that you know. You're going to have to really make a business of selling a lot of information, putting it out there. Most people are going to dejectedly walk away. On the other hand, I firmly believe that any good writer can be commercially successful as a writer. And I think the same is true about being a royalty published author, because if you look at the statistics, they say only 5% of books ever get accepted by agents or publishers. That is correct. However, more than half of the proposals that get sent to agents or editors stink. And I lay out exactly the reasons why they stink. If you write a proposal that doesn't stink, that's market focused, that's saleable, that's written well, that follows the form and genre of a nonfiction book proposal, and you multiply that by the number of agents and editors that are out there and publishers, I think your chances rise to a more reasonable 50-50 in my view. And frankly, most of my career, as I went through many years of having my walls papered with rejection slips back in the 80s and 90s when I started writing seriously. But once I really studied and learned and got in the groove of following the genre, it's very rare that I would come up with an idea for a book that would not end up on a bookshelf somewhere with a major publisher.
And you give that all to us in the book, Rich. I mean, that's the crazy thing, right? I mean, this book on the Kindle, it's anywhere between 99 cents and I think $5?
$2.99 at the moment.
$2.99 right now. Yeah. So come on. Right. I mean, this, if you're thinking, boy, oh boy, you know what? I hate my corporate job. I wish I could find an exit plan. For $3, Rich lays out how to become $1 million writer. And I say this, like Rich mentioned, I encourage the idea because it's a great solution. It's a proven system. Rich has done this. This is his life here. This is not pontification on how to become Pope from somebody who's Jewish here. This is real stuff that Rich has done. And it's not an overnight success, though. So this is all stuff that you can do. You can build up to now. You could do it kind of in your spare time, start building your income so that eventually you'll hit some escape velocity. So, Rich, if we think about here, as we're kind of getting close to wrapping this up, what are some pitfalls that writers can look to miss because they're going to buy a copy of your book?
I think you just laid that out beautifully, by the way. This is a process where you gradually build your skills. The single biggest caveat is for anything in this book to be useful for you, number one, you have to be a good writer. If you are deadline challenged, if you write in LOL text speak most of the time, if your spell checker goes crazy when you sit down at the word processor, this is not the book and this is not the career for you. But on the other hand, if you're like most writers I know who are serious, professional, and write reasonably well, then this really is a game plan for laying out a good career. For example, one of the things that I give in the book is I deconstruct one of my successful book proposals for a book that was my best-selling book by unit volume, How to Tell Anyone Anything, still in print after almost a decade, and was a top 10 career skills book. I walk you through exactly what you should and shouldn't say at each stage of the book proposal. One quick example is the competitive analysis. Your book lives or dies on how it compares to books that are selling. The worst thing you could do is say that this book is for everybody, because editors will immediately turn away from that. The second worst thing you can do is not have an opening page that doesn't just go pow right in the kisser with the benefits of the book, because an editor is at most going to give you 30 seconds before they give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I walk you through how to write a query letter that's a one-page email that either gets that interest for you or doesn't, so that when you send that proposal, it's a warm introduction and they're waiting for it.
Wow. So simple stuff for $3, folks. I'm serious. I mean, even if you just buy this book and you do some of the work here that Rich talks about, because you've always had a book inside you, you can make a difference. I think that's the coolest thing that Rich offers here is it's a blueprint for you to do this. There's so much there, and Rich he gives it to you. I mean, my goodness, $3. Let's pretend that Rich gets 70% of that. That's like $2.10 there, doing the math quick, right? $2.10.
So maybe $2, Richard.
$2, right? I mean, it's not making that much of a difference. Rich is doing this because it's in his heart, because it's something that he believes in you, folks. If you're listening, if you're watching, and you're like, gosh, I need to do something. I'm serious. spend the $3. Invest the $3. If you hate this book, send me your receipt and tell me you hate it. Phil@philgerbishak.com. I'm not kidding you. I'll send you $3 because for real, this book is that good. It is that awesome. Well, it's true, Rich, and I'm happy to do this, and I'm serious. If people watch this and they're like, I bought $1 Million Writer. Now, here's the thing. You got to do the work. Okay, this is the full disclaimer of the book here. This is not a buy the book, feel good, and yay, yay, rah, rah. Now I'm a cheerleader and now I made money. This is do the freaking work. So, Rich,
and I'm gonna
last thoughts to you, buddy.
Okay, and you teed that up perfectly. The other thing is love to write. I love writing. It's that guy in the paper is so much more interesting and worldly than I'm ever going to be in person. And so, if you love to write, if you're a good writer, those are the essential ingredients. Just one other quick thing I want to throw out there is if you like to read on Kindle, that's great. $1 Million Writer is actually outselling the Merriam-Webster Dictionary and Thesaurus and the Elements of Style on Kindle this week, so that's fine. It's also available as an Audible audiobook. So if you want to spend $7 instead of $3, listen to it in your car. And I also have a complete audio course and workbook program for $47 that you can get on themilliondollarwriter.com. So however I can best serve you, that information's out there.
So, folks, $1 million here. $1 million. You can freaking get a copy of Rich's, all of his goodness here. You can learn how you can be a $1 million writer. You can learn from Rich's 20 plus years of writing so that you can actually make a life writing. The URL is themilliondollarwriter.com. This might have been my
$1 Million Writer.
Just $1 Million Writer. Oh crap! I'm sorry, Rich. I'll fix that.
Not a problem.
Just $1 Million Writer. Okay, I misheard you, so that's my fault. I just go right to the source. So yeah,
no problem.
So that is the key there. So $1milliondollarwriter.com, just $1milliondollarwriter.com. Rich is the bomb here. 20 years of experience, $47 for the course, $2.99 for the freaking Kindle, $7 for the Audible, and a lifetime of goodness from Rich. Rich, buddy, thank you so much for being here with us today. You are just the best, man.
You too.
Thanks, buddy. All right, cool, folks. Well, go check it out. Go to $1milliondollarwriter.com. Go to Amazon. Go wherever you need to go so you can get smarter. You can be on your way to being a $1 million writer, just like the amazing Rich Gallagher. Till next time,